let's start the dojo for design system for mobile. So first of all, to introduce myself, I'm Kevin. I'm an iOS engineer at Mercari Marketplace, and I joined Mercari in 2023. So I've been working here for a little bit more than 1 year. For today's agenda, we're going to cover 4 main points about design systems. The first point is, why would a design system information be relevant to you? The second point will be, what is a design system? Like, what is the actual concept of a design system? The third point is, why are design systems important and why are they needed in our workplace? And finally, we will go through the implementation and the structure of the design system that we use in Mercari. Okay, so to start, first of all, why are design systems relevant to you? Because I think we have people from multiple roles and doing different things. But the design system can be useful for multiple roles, as you can see in this slide. For example, for designers, the design system is useful to build or design UIs when we create like designs for different screens in our application. Of course, for mobile and for the engineers, we use the design system to understand what designers are trying to tell us. And we also use the design system to more accurately create screens or pages in our applications. For QAs, for example, we can use the design system to understand how we structure the design in our screens, and we can spot inconsistencies in created styles. Like, for example, some colors are different. And for other roles, such as, for example, backend engineer, or ML engineer, it's also useful to understand the overall design structure, because when we design things like data or interfaces or API interfaces, sometimes we need to interact with things such as styles or colors. And understanding how the design system works also help us design this kind of information. All right, so as for the second point, what is a design system? If you quickly Google what is a design system, you will get like multiple definitions. And I think maybe multiple engineers or designers have their own concepts. And there's no real one concept for design system, because each company or each application is going to implement the design system differently. But you can see like multiple definitions. For example, a design system offers a library of visual styles, components, and other documented things. Or it could be like a collection of reusable components and so on. So just to summarize it with my own words, the design system is basically just a guideline that consists of things such as rules, styles, and components, which help us build applications, user experiences. Another point is that the design system itself is not really a new idea. Of course, we use design systems in Mercari, but in the real world, and this concept already exists, and it has been used for a long time. Now, about the origins of design systems. Design systems are actually a software engineering pattern, because they were born, or basically they were conceptualized during some software engineering conference, where someone tried to understand how can we create designs, or how can we create guidelines to make designs more standardized. And design system is just a derivative of basically a software design pattern. So if we want to describe a design system in 3 particular words, one would be a guideline, as I described before, is a guideline for creating designs. But the design system also serves as a common language that is used across multiple stakeholders, such as designers or engineers, to have a common understanding about what we're talking about. So we can use things such as tokens to identify colors, or to identify things like spacings or particular values like fonts. And at the same time, a design system also serves as a library which is used to build user interfaces. In this case, for example, when an engineer tries to implement a UI, they're not going to create the component from scratch. They will actually refer to our design system library, which already provides components that we already understand that are used in the design, but also exist in code. Okay. Right, that's the end of what is a design system. And the next point is, why do we need design systems? Like, why are design systems important for us, and what are the benefits of actually implementing a design system? So to illustrate this, let's use an example. In this example, we're not going to use a design system, and we're going to try to implement one UI. So to the right side, you see is basically text that says link text. This is the text that we want to implement. So let's say we're given this design where we want like a blue link text. To the left side, we have some Android code, and we have some code that defines this text. So we have a text, and we define the raw value of the color, right? So the color is defined as a variable, as a value in color, and it's like hard coding code because, well, we think this is the color, right? But let's say we want to create more text now, and it's supposed to be the same, but we want to create it in a different place. Maybe the design was a different color, or maybe we just copy the value incorrectly, and it's slightly different, right? It is a slightly clear color of the link text. And well, as you keep adding and adding more or reusing this same component, which is supposed to be the same, you may find places in your application where the style is different, right? The colors are actually not the same, and well, there's sometimes a background, and so on. Now, if we were to use a design system instead of how we did before, how would this happen? Is that going back into how we start designing this interface. If you go, for example, to your design tool, in this case it's Figma, using the design system, we can inspect elements, and instead of looking through raw values such as the font or for example 300 weight, we have token information such as this font is small, or this color is not just a raw color, but it's called like being default. Now token information that we can use to implement our UIs. And so now we try to refactor our previous code. It's going to look much simpler. Right? We don't need to use raw values. We already know what is a token. Because our design system is also a library, we can directly reference that library by using the token. For example, in this case, text link. And by doing so, we make sure that everything is going to look the same. Yeah, another example as to why we need design systems is that communicating designs, between designers and other stakeholders is hard. It's a hard activity. To illustrate this, let's take like an example task in which we want to display an apple. So in the top row, we have designers, and in the bottom row, we have engineers. So let's say that we have multiple designers, and we have multiple engineers designing this apple. So each designer thinks of their own version of apple. May look similar, or it may have different color, or it may even look like a different fruit. And then the engineers get this information, right? And it may look the same. It may be the same apple, but someone like the third engineer may miss the information and think that the apple is actually orange. So yeah, there are like multiple different stages in communication that can go wrong, right? And the result of this kind of situation is that, for example, when we implement our UI, we end up with different styles. So you see like the OK button could be a rectangle, or sometimes it's like a capsule, or you can see like the camera button, it's a circle sometimes, and maybe in a different screen, it's not a circle anymore. So as different people implement different parts, and we have different designers, designing different parts of the UI, it's easy to get information wrong and not to have a unified style. So if we were to communicate with a design system, we would use tokens instead of raw information or just or information. So as part of the design system, we define that an apple is going to look like this, and we create a token that goes along with it. So when designers need to design this apple, they only need to refer to the token. So they all refer to the same token, and thus they are referring to the same apple. And when they communicate this information to engineers, they only communicate the token. So the engineers don't need to understand what is an apple. They only need the information that this is an apple token. And when they use that in their design system library, it is going to look exactly the way that it's supposed to look. All right, so just to summarize, how did the design system help in this situation? It was a guideline for designers to create the apple correctly. It was a language in which we use tokens to communicate our design effectively. And finally, it was used as a library to implement the design without having to interpret it from the engineering side. Right, we are about halfway the session, and the next topic is going to be it's a very small topic, but we're going to talk about evolution of design tools, like which kind of design tools we have historically used to convey and design UI interfaces, user interfaces. As the years goes on, new tools were created that allowed us to design mobile user interfaces with more ease, such as Sketch, which is one of the first ones in 2010. And then came like Zeppelin 2015, and then Figma 2016. Or Figma is the most popular one right now, and is also the one that we use in Mercari. And some of the benefits of these like new tools used for designing is that it's not only easy to design, but we have access to inspect information of components, such as checking what is the color, or what is the color token. For example, this button is a primary default. What is the border, and so on. We also have the ability to reuse components on a design tool level. So we have a watch component that we can reuse across different designs. And whenever we inspect, this watch component, we can see that, okay, this is a watch component, right? It's not just some randomly created UI. There's actually a component tied to it. Of course, these like modern design tools also have some limitations. Like, for example, there are certain styles that you cannot define as tokens, like spacing, for example, like the difference between, left component and right component. There's some space, but can we inspect what is the actual token? This is a little bit hard still. We cannot like reference one style as part of another style. Like we cannot, for example, create one style that combines two other styles. It's just like referencing a single style. And it's not so easy to switch themes. Like, let's say you have like a different collection of colors that you want to apply in different situations, but you want it to like share the same tokens. You cannot have this kind of functionality natively. We still need to, get some third-party plugins to achieve this functionality. Okay. So next, we are going to look at how we use the design system in Mercari. This is specifically from an engineer's point of view. How do we consume the design system in Mercari? In this slide, you can see 4 different boxes. At the very bottom, we have the screen, which is basically the screen of your phone. And at the very top, we have the design system, right, which is the design system of Mercari. So how is the design system used, in our application? Basically, at the bottom, we have the screen, right? So in our screen, we show one feature. And this feature has a particular user interface, and it has a particular design, right? So it has information about, components and colors and fonts and so on. So the relationship of this feature and the design system is the design system implementation. As as the words we used before, the design system implementation will be the library of the design system, which exists in code, which we actually use to reference things such as tokens and components. And it allows us to create these features faster and with more consistency. So we don't need to build like things from scratch. So looking at the same thing, but a little bit with examples. So on the left side, we have the screen, right? This is an item detail screen of Mercari. And to the right side, we have the feature, which is the code. So you see this feature is actually a primary button, right? So the developer who created this screen knew that it had to use a primary button. But it didn't need to create a primary button from scratch, because now we're on the right side, we see in the DS implementation, we are just referencing library component. This is actually implemented somewhere else in our DS implementation. And this DS implementation is actually following the guidelines of the design system. So on the top, you have like a Figma space where information about the design system primary buttons is defined. Like this is the primary button, and what these are the different states and the colors and spacing and so on. All right. And as for our last section, we're gonna briefly go through how is the actual design system structure in Mercari, and what are like the different parts, and what is the detail of the Mercari design system. So before we go into the actual detail, very briefly, we can look at the history of the Mercari design system. So as you know, Mercari was like, at the start, it was like a startup, and we created like our first initial version of the Mercari app. And at that time, there was no design system. It was just a design, original design, right? And further down the line, Mercari introduced design system into the company, and this became the first design system. I think there were efforts to improve this design system, to add like new features such as a better accessibility and so on. But what actually preceded our first design system is the design system 3.0, which is actually the design system that we're using right now at this moment. And as you see next to the bubble, the design system 3.0 is characterized because it is based on the latest technologies of iOS and Android, such as Swift UI and Jetpack Compose. So it is made to work a lot more seamlessly with this kind of code, declarative code. And to the right side, you can see that there is a design system 4.0. This is actually the future, and we are already started to work and migrate to our new design system, which is not fully implemented yet, but this is going to be out of the scope of this presentation. All right, so two key parts of the Mercari design system are the left side styles, which define things such as color values, size values, typography, and so on, which basically define what is the appearance of our application. And to the right side, we have components, which are basically constructions based on the style, which are reused across the application, such as buttons or titles or sections and item grids and so on. So for the first part, the style, which basically defines the theme or also represents the brand of our company. You can see some examples of what is the Mercari style. So in our design system, we define things such as, for example, brand colors, like let's say blue, black, and different tones of the color. And we also define things such as icons, right? For example, if we want a heart icon, it's going to be called like outlined, like a like icon, and it's always going to look like this. There are other values such as, for example, corner radius to left side, things such as the duration of multiple things, such as, for example, animations, or easing tokens, like easing, ease out, easing out, and so on. For next part, what is Mercari components composed of? Is things like this, buttons, or a button with an icon, or maybe a toggle button is going to look like this, or we have components such as a chip, or a group of chips, or an action row. Other components as well, not only buttons, such as, for example, navigation components. Even the tab bar of our application is also a navigation button design system component. Things like tabs, dialogues, snack bars. So we have many different kinds of components, which will allow us to build as many types of interfaces as possible and as flexibly as possible. One important part of Mercari's design system is what are the requirements that we must meet as part of our design system. This is strictly speaking talking about design system 3.0, which is our current design system. First of all, is that we must use latest technologies. So our current design system is based on latest technologies, as we already described, but it must also work on multiple devices, right? So we define our design system components, which should work on a phone, or it should work on a tablet, or in case of web, it should work on a desktop. We must meet different accessibility features, which we'll go a little bit more into detail later. And it should allow us to support like multiple brands. As you know, we have in Mercari, we don't only have the marketplace, which is C2C, customer to customer, but we also have like B2C, which is business to consumer. For the first point, we adopt the latest technologies. In case of 3.0, we adopt SwiftUI and Jetpack Compose. One important reason as to why we need to be really close to these latest technologies is because the way in which we currently write UI code, actually this is a couple of years back already, but in comparison to older technologies, is pretty different. Now, we use declarative syntax and much less code. So the design system is adapted to work efficiently with this kind of code structure. Well, in the case of iOS, we no longer use like storyboards or UI kit, so everything is code-based. And it's also like native on all platforms. So as long as we write this code, it should, well, with very little alterations, work on different platforms, such as phone, or even like your MacBook or tablet, and so on. And not only this, but we have built certain tools for productivity, which are based on top of our design system. So how can we make sure that our design system is kept up to date and it doesn't break as we iterate through our product? In Mercari, we have we use a tool called Playbook, which is basically just a collection of different UIs. In our case, it's just an app. It deploys as an app, which give us a collection of what are all our design system components. So we can open this playbook and see what are all our design system components. And we can see how they look and their different variations. And it's not only to browse through all these components and styles, but we also use Playbook to implement snapshot tests. So when we develop new features, the Playbook information is used as a base to compare old and new code to make sure that we didn't break any part of the design system, making sure that it stays consistent not only across screens, but also across updates. Finally, the last part is accessibility. So our final requirement for a Mercari design system is that it must meet certain accessibility standards. So the first of them is dark mode. The Mercari design system works both on light and dark mode, which means that, for example, a primary color has two variations of the color, right? It has one color that works in light mode, and it has one color that works in dark mode. And it works for all the colors. So it means that developers that are creating UIs, they really don't need to care about light or dark mode. They just create it based on the information of the design and design tokens, and it should seamlessly work in either style. Other important thing that we consider in our design system is the ability to support dynamic type, which means that as we use design system components, they will, by default, support font scaling. So this is also something we don't need to consider in the day-to-day development. This is already part of our design system. And another point of accessibility is voiceover. So our design system components are created in a way already that consider how good can they be presented for accessibility features such as voiceover, so that users that need this feature can properly hear the correct information about each component, and they can also navigate properly across each different section of the screen. All right, I think, if I'm not wrong, this is the last part of the explanation of Mercari's design system, which also covers the last part of accessibility. So that will be a thank you slide.